I do know that Peter Duesberg is correct when he assessed all those years ago and even today maintains that the whole claims that a retrovirus was going to kill and decimate the populations of planet Earth, much less that it was the cause of an immune deficiency. He stood against the entire consensus establishment of the pharmaceutical industrial complex many years ago. And he still maintains that unless, well, Peter, maybe he's changed his mind. We'll give him the opportunity to do that today. It is an annual tradition here on the Robert Scott Bell Show to bring on some of these very special folks to me that have withstood a lot of assaults. In a more recent context, many of you in my audience know about Andrew Wakefield, how his last name became a verb. To be Wakefielded was to tell other doctors, do not, PhD research, do not go against consensus on the vaccine issue, any way, shape, or form. We will destroy you. And many years prior to that, again, they did this to Peter Duesberg, but he's still standing, and he's still smiling, and he's still laughing, which is a real credit to his character as well. And Peter, again, any change of heart, change of mind over all these years, your stance on what you've said over the years?
That's it. On the contrary, I had some doubts initially. That's how I started. Mm-hmm. I was a certified retrovirologist. That was my career. I was the blue-eyed boy here. I got advanced in very short time to a full professor after I arrived from Germany, and I became a member of the National Academy of Sciences, and I had outstanding investigator accounts. I had everything I could dream of. And once I said, well, these retroviruses are potential something, might cause cancer someday, under some conditions, but certainly not killing cells, which would be the basis for AIDS, that it would kill T cells and B cells. That is practically impossible for these viruses. That's why we picked them as cancer viruses. They would never kill a cell. That was their lifestyle. They wouldn't kill cells. And that has yet to be proven in one single case. That's the basis for the theory that HIV is the cause of AIDS, that it kills T cells and causes immune deficiency. That has yet to be proven. So 30 years and roughly, I think, $30 billion later.
Well, do you think they need another 30 years and $300 billion? Would that make the difference?
I think they wouldn't mind, because it's what Carey Mullis always called, the famous Carey Mullis always called the Institute of Further Studies. They will never say, now it's finished.
Yes, we call it the black hole of research. Where do the funds go? I don't know, but keep sending more.
That's exactly what I do. Yeah, I mean, and it is very difficult to step back once you are in the front line and have all these grants and these privileges, and anything that's coming with you is easy, and then all of a sudden you're just studying a virus, a passenger virus that does do nothing. You would that is a difficult way to go back to.
Yes.
So that's why even the reporters, the newspapers, and except Scott Bell, seem to have politely no longer asked questions about HIV and AIDS.
Yeah, well, we've always asked the question. I learned because as a homeopath, we looked at the body so much differently. We acknowledged the work of European researchers and doctors, and these people that had insight, like Antoine Béchamp, Claude Bernard. These are the people that I eventually learned from. Even though they were long gone from this planet, their writings, research, and teachings, and it made sense. What the so-called AIDS virus as an HIV never made sense, although I wouldn't have known that had I not been introduced to a whole other paradigm, if you will, of how nature, in fact, would work. It would make no sense to create something like this, and as we know, and as you know in virology, how viruses indeed work, and in fact, we would acknowledge you don't have to catch a virus. They're endogenous viruses, which would mean why would they be necessarily deadly? Why would we carry viruses? Could some be communication tools? Could there be other perspectives on viruses besides being pathogenic?
Absolutely, yeah. Besides being just a so-called passenger. Why not get a free ride and have your own life? That's the virus's point of view. Yeah. Well, that's what they do.
Well, and look at what we've learned in the past few years, much less decades, but certainly the past few years, a grand acceleration into something known as the microbiome, which I don't know when you were going through your schooling to become a PhD, was there such a word as the microbiome?
No, they didn't have those new words yet. It was called microbiology, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So was that your starting point? You argued or you realized that is unlikely that something that is part of your latent microbial flora, whatever biome, would cause a fatal disease. Was that your first question?
My mentor in homeopathy, brought me to this concept of the law of the terrain, and the recognition that many of these things are endogenous viruses, whether they be considered retro or not, and that they would only activate when the body was somehow impaired. And that impairment wasn't because of the virus, right? The virus was a manifestation of the impairment, right? That the body became toxic and or deficient in certain minerals that are key for normal, healthy, optimal metabolic functions and immune functions. And it was the only thing that made sense. It's like, why would this happen when we know of viruses in an acute sense? And even how to counteract them or how to get people through them fast. But to suddenly have this so-called chronic scenario that would, up one day and kill you or would be sexually transmitted, and never before had this been seen. There was so much that didn't make sense. And you wrote about, the subpopulations that were hit hardest by this immune challenge. And that included the homosexuals and the lifestyles that they led in the party scene in San Francisco and New York, etc. The extreme illicit drug taking and also the official FDA-approved drug prescribing by doctors for the genuine STDs they suffered from.
Right, yeah. So it included, in fact, it was all there was to it. I don't ever see any good evidence that your average all-American heterosexual couple with a few dates outside marriage here and there ever gets AIDS. Nowhere.
Right, and then we have to redefine age to separate it out from HIV, because the big problem, and one of my good buddies who who passed away, it's just hard to believe he passed away almost a year ago or more now, Liam Sheff, another great writer, researcher, and everything that he did.
That was a big surprise to me too. I just found out about that a week or 2 weeks ago. I never saw any advertisement why and what. Is there anything known?
Well, he subjected himself to dental work after having not gone through dentistry for 25 plus years, and they were doing teeth work and constant, a number of episodes, and it created such severe tinnitus and pains that he couldn't sleep, and it was ongoing months, and nothing, allopathic or holistic, was touching it. And it finally did him in. So it's a tragedy of a tall order.
It's dental work?
Dental work, yes.
Did he get implants? Or
no implants, no nothing. Just the grinding and the drilling, all of that. He already had a hypersensitive nervous system, and I've talked about this with, all my listeners know the story, because he was a regular here on the show, and he would sometimes co-host. Sometimes he would substitute host for me. But what a brilliant mind, and, he had an insatiable appetite to find, the facts and reveal those truths. And, as you know, we talk about a lot of the heroes out there, such as yourself, and you mentioned Carrie Mullis. We got Bauer. We got all these names are just come rolling through. A lot of them have been on this show over the years. Harvey Bialy, of course. Just an incredible history that we've been able to reveal here on the show over the years. But I bring up Liam because he brought up in very great detail the problems with the so-called HIV test itself. That whether or not HIV is real has been isolated. You can almost put that aside for a moment, even though that's important. But say, all right, what does the test do? What does it actually detect? And if it tests positive for 70, 80, 100, 120 different things, what is it really telling you? How is it real? And then, as you saw in House of Numbers, the Brentley Young, the young filmmaker that put the documentary together, suddenly you found by he going to some of the big names within the construct of the HIV equals AIDS, and they acknowledged the frailty of their own testing, the inaccuracy, the things that where you have a medical test with no standard, how can it be valid for anything?
That for one, that was my second argument against the whole thing. The virus is never found, not ever was found. In fact, the whole scandal you reported on, the Gallows scandal,
yes, Gallows
the misappropriation of the virus, speaks to itself. Gallo is not that incompetent. He had 50 postdocs in his lab. when I was there, they could have found a virus that is causing a fatal disease. It must got to be there at a certain level of concentration in order to kill you. You're not dying from a virus that you can't see. And he had been unable to isolate it from 50 or 100 patients. He had to get it through the mail, as we say, from Montagnier.
Montagnier, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And even then, the test, what is the test based on? When you say your virus positive, what it really measures in almost all cases is antibody against the virus.
Against which virus still is the question, though, because it's cross-reactive.
Well, that makes it further complicated. But even if this test were the best and most direct and most specific you can get, in some cases it may even be. If you have antibody against the virus, you're not going to get the disease. Since Edward Jenner,
yes,
in 1792, not 1972, 1792, 200 years ago, he invented or discovered the principle of vaccination. Once the body makes antibodies to a virus or to another microbe, but virus is more efficient than anything else, that virus will never get into a cell again because an antibody molecule will hang on its coat, literally on its coat. And the cell won't take it up. It can't take it up anymore. The cellular receptors are not able to accommodate an antibody.
Well,
this is why vaccines have been the only and most definitive protection and prevention of disease and even cures of disease by yourself. For millions of years.
Professor Duesberg, the controversy there, of course, is that even if you have antibodies, for instance, to the chicken pox, right, which you may have acquired as a child or now they vaccinate for, you're still vulnerable to that virus when the shingles rears its ugly head. And I want to talk about that with you, the complexity of the immune system beyond antibodies, but also how the era of HIV turned immunology on its head. Not for the better, for the worse. We're going to talk about that. Professor Peter Duesberg is my guest. We're back after this.
The Robert Scott Bell Show.
So in my studies of the immune system, Professor Duesberg, of course, I come at it from, as I mentioned to you, the law of the terrain concept, right? So the idea of vaccination to me is controversial as a homeopath because I didn't allow them near my children with those shots. Not because I pick it against antibodies. I have nothing against antibodies, really. But the way they elicit it with the toxic injections that bypass normal ways our immune system interacts with the world to elicit that immune response, to me is very dangerous. So that maybe even if they're successful, you can identify it because your antibodies were elicited into reality. But to me, I liken it like this. If you, for instance, are given a pair of binoculars so you can see a train coming down the tracks an extra 10 miles away, but your immune system is tied down to the tracks because of the toxic heavy metals that are in it, for instance, what good will the binoculars be except to say, hey, look, there comes the virus. I see it coming. I see it. And you can't get up off the tracks. So the idea of eliciting antibody response, I got nothing against that. But the way they do it, I think, is so damaging to the body, the human immune system, that the cost is too great, considering that I have other mechanisms by which I can stimulate immunity. Does that make sense?
That would definitely make sense. But I would distinguish between vaccinations by live attenuated microbes, viruses, and artificially injecting synthetic proteins or artificially denatured proteins for fear of an infection in the first place. So the natural infection, like the polio vaccine, you essentially swallow a cube of sugar with an attenuated strain of virus that causes a natural infection, even though at a time when you didn't expect it or wanted it, perhaps. But because it's attenuated, the dose is controlled, and presumably you get it at a good time. It's typically asymptomatic. You have no symptoms or maybe a bit diarrhea for a day, and that's it. That's the natural thing. But if you inject like they do now with the papilloma virus, completely
That's a mess. Absolute mess, yeah. And, of course, putting it on a sugar cube is immunosuppressive, ironically, because we know that. But the idea of naturally acquired infection, I agree. Quite different, especially as you're going through the oral mucosa, the GI tract. This is the way we would normally interact with these things. And, when I heard there were measles and chickenpox in the neighborhood, I got my kids over to get that done fast, in a hurry, early, right?
That's the perfect way of doing it.
Exactly.
Of course, make sure that the kids are in good shape when they go there. Not that they have a fever and a cold and a diarrhea and a dental problem.
They're chronically wrecked with allergies and everything. And, of course, they ignore these chronic ailments and immune dysfunction when they inject these things. So, again, I'm with you, Professor Duesberg, and I think it's great to have this discussion so we make the nuance, because, it's easy to just hear a word and think you mean something, and it's so important to get beyond that to the real meaning. And that's why I love having you on to where we can go that. It is World AIDS Day. I call it World AIDS Fraud Day because the pharmaceutical industry and those who benefit and profit from it handsomely don't want to have the discussion that Professor Duesberg has been having since the beginning, and we're continuing to do here, because it's very awkward when you point out the inconsistencies in their claims and their statements, which is why these people won't come on the show and talk to me about these inconsistencies, because they'll blow a gasket and they start yelling and screaming and go ad hominem, which is the first evidence that they have no argument. But they're making a lot of money as long as people don't look at it and ask these very awkward questions, and then they'll get answers they don't like.
Yeah, and the worst consequences of the virus AIDS epidemic is what they call their failure to make a vaccine against it. The only thing they ever detect as a vaccine is the antibody, and that instead of acknowledging that, they say we have to now make some antiviral drugs to protect you. And these drugs are nothing else but DNA chain terminator. Exactly the same drugs that were developed in the 60s and 70s and ever since now as anti-cancer drugs, designed for the sole purpose of killing growing cells. These drugs like AZT, which was the first one approved, I think, for HIV/AIDS, is still now in all of these cocktails. There's 1 or 3 or 4 cocktails in one shot, in one pill or whatever it is, and they're all DNA chain terminators or inhibiting protein synthesis. Each one of these processes is inevitably
vital
toxic.
for life. It's vital for life.
It kills cells.
So it's indiscriminate
when you have a cancer that's going to kill you predictably anyway, and you try to use these things, it's sort of a differential killing.
Yeah, Professor Duesberg, I apologize, we're out of time. Will you stick around for another segment?
Sure.
Oh, this is great news. Professor Peter Duesberg is my guest. He's going to stick around to open up hour 2 with us, and we've got more to discuss on this World AIDS Fraud Day on the Robert Scott Bell Show, because the power to heal is still yours.
The Robert Scott Bell Show.
Message and data rates may apply.
Guys, got hair loss? I know what you're thinking. Should I shave my head? Comb it over? Wear a hat? Just stop. This isn't 1970. Keep your hair and your confidence, because Bosley, America's #1 hair restoration expert, can give you your real hair back permanently. Check them out today, because they're giving away an absolutely free information kit and a free gift card to everyone who texts EASY66 to 85850. Dude, you don't have to look like your dad, because this isn't your dad's hair loss treatment. People all over the country trust Bosley because they're ahead of the curve. They use the latest technology to give you your real hair back. And the best part, Bosley's permanent solution is protected by the Bosley Guarantee. Let them show you for free how awesome your hair could look with an absolutely free information kit and a gift card for $250 off. Text EASY66 to 85850. Ask about the Bosley Guarantee. EASY66 to 85850.
This is Dan Pilla. Do you owe the IRS money you can't pay? Are tax debts crippling you? I've defended people from the IRS for over 30 years. I've helped thousands, and I can help you too. I wrote the book on IRS settlement, and I'm telling you, there's no such thing as a hopeless case. Call 800-34-NO-TAX to finally get free of IRS debt. With the IRS's new programs, there's never been a better time to solve your problem. Call 800-34-NO-TAX. That's 800-34-NO-TAX, or my website, danpilla.com.
Age-related macular degeneration is a leading cause of blindness in people over 55, but with treatment it can be slowed down, stopped, and in some cases reversed. Make sure you see your grandchildren grow. Protect your vision by requesting information about diagnosing and treating AMD. Call the Foundation Fighting Blindness today at 1-800-BLINDNESS for a free packet on reversing or managing AMD, or go to the website fightblindness.org, where I found so much helpful information. Or again, call 1-800-BLINDNESS today.
Scott Bell.
This hour on the Robert Scott Bell Show, we continue our discussion with Professor Peter Duesberg. Also, I have a guest by the name of Bobby Russell, who I've interviewed before, and he was ensnared in the HIV test trap. And he's got a suit that hopefully will go all the way up to the Supreme Court based on a false diagnosis. Fascinating how this impacts individuals. And so we're going to go more into that this hour. But right now, Professor Duesberg continues with us. We were talking about the immune system, and I'm going to get, this is the segment where we are going to talk about your paper, talking about the prediction of AIDS decimating the populations of Africa. But first and foremost, I want to state it clearly how the era of HIV/AIDS was the era that destroyed immunological integrity, where all prior to that, and you mentioned Jenner back in the 1790s, an antibody meant you were going to live. It meant you had encountered something, you had defended successfully, you've overcome it. And in the era of AIDS, now suddenly it became a death sentence. And this is how they now tell people that you have hepatitis C or that you have HPV, that it's inevitable, it's a disaster, you're going to die somehow. And so has anything changed on that? Has anybody pointed out this absurdity besides you?
A few people I meet have done that. But you don't even need any allies. That is so fundamentally, logically flawed, that argument, that antibody is going to be an indication of bad things to come, a prognosis for disease. It's the other way around. It's an absolute paradox to say the antibody is going to predicting a disease to come. Every doctor, if you ask him just one by one, what can I do against syphilis or gonorrhea, or against polio, or against hepatitis, you have to get vaccinated. Then you can go have parties in the jungle or where you want to go to, because vaccines are protecting you. And when you say, what about HIV? And then all of a sudden they stand on their head and say,
oops.
Okay, that is, of course, there it's very different. It's just the other way around. But how can it be the other way around? Antibodies are there to keep the virus down, and they work with HIV just as well as with others. That's the reason why Dr. Gallo, our friend Dr. Gallo, had such difficulties finding the virus, because he found antibody there against it. When there's antibody, there's no virus.
So the predictions about decimation of the population of Africa, how did they pan out, right? South Africa has no people in it, right? Nigeria there's nobody there. And Uganda, oh my gosh, the seat of a lot of the epidemic. There's nobody alive there, right?
These were the epicenters, yeah. And here's what, I was blamed of endangering the global public health, because I pointed out it looks like despite millions of antibody positives in Africa, the population is growing. Indeed, is exploding at a rate that has never been recorded before in the history of mankind. Black Africa, which was carrying at least 30 million virus infections and growing, as they said in the Lancet, New England Journal of Medicine and Science, is going to be doomed unless we find something to stop it very soon. So here are the numbers, the very, very basic numbers. That was in 85, 86, 87, when the AIDS epidemic was just becoming very popular. They found these millions. Now, at that time, the black Africans, not the Muslims in the north and something like that, but the black Africans were 480 million people. 480 million people. And they were doomed to be exterminated by HIV. And now, 30 years later, they have 1.2 billion black Africans in Africa, about almost 3 times as much as they were then. That is the fastest population explosion ever recorded in the history of mankind.
So what happened? They clearly cured AIDS with all the drugs and the vaccine. Clearly, because obviously the population has tripled. Everything's fine, right?
Yeah, or HIV is instead of killing people, it's helping people to multiply.
Right, exactly. So what is Bono from the band U2 doing out there? They're still raising money for this decimation of the population that apparently never happened.
It does happen at a small scale when they have drugs enough to treat them. Then they also get sick as we do in this country.
Yes.
Almost half of our AIDS patients now in America, in the United States, where over 1 million are on these antiviral drugs. Almost half of them die now from diseases that are not even designated or defined as AIDS-defining diseases. As you know, AIDS is presumably the cause of 27 old previously known diseases.
Any one of which could have killed you if you were weak enough.
In the old days, yeah. But the people who die from AIDS in this country, for AIDS certificates, are dying mostly from heart, kidney, and lung failure.
Those were not AIDS-defining diseases.
They're not, guess what they are? They are toxicity DNA
diseases,
chain terminal toxicity, defining diseases.
This is iatrogenocide, Peter.
I mean, I had to say it, but you're free to say it more than I do because they call me a mass murderer then.
No, it's modern medicine and their insanity to poison the people back to health. Those are the murderers, in my opinion.
And it's AIDS by prescription.
Yes.
Really, they're by prescription. You don't even have to use stronger words, but it is designed. It's not a side effect. It's designed to kill human cells for cancer chemotherapy, for cancer therapy, where you try to kill the cancer because the advantage you have is the cancer usually goes faster than normal cells. So the fastest growing cell is dying first.
Yes.
So a successful chemotherapy, a rational thing, not a pretty thing, is to kill the cancer and keep the patient alive, even though he or she will suffer
I call it a
collateral damage.
Yeah, I call it a game of chemotherapeutic chicken, and it's like the two cars that race against each other. You see who turns first, and you hope that their human cells survive long enough to survive the onslaught, and the cancer cells don't. Again, to me, that's an insane concept. I understand why people want to kill things that they perceive to be bad guys, but the argument of the law of the terrain says, hey, what about toxicity? What about deficiency? What about clean water? What about sanitation, sewage, hygiene? All of those factors that I have argued, you have argued, many I've argued the hygiene hypothesis for disease as opposed to the viral cause of disease.
That is a perfect analogy that you're making. Yeah.
Opportunistics, right? You get toxic and you get deficient. Guess what? You know, organic farmers have seen this. If their soils are sick, as they call it, if the soils lack the minerals, the life forms to break down the things needed by the plants are sick, they end up infested by bugs. And of course, modern medicine comes to the rescue in the form of a pesticide, an herbicide, a fungicide, etc. So we have a wrong way of thinking in my perspective. It is a paradigm deficiency, if you will, a paradigm deficiency disease. Our paradigm is wrong in looking at disease causation.
At least we see on that one. We see on that and I think it's more and more people, and I talk to, they're not as fiery about the virus anymore, but the sanctions still persist. I have not been able to get one research grant in 25 years. I mean, I'm in that regard, I'm indeed an outstanding, almost hero to stay to have a laboratory as small as it is going without ever getting once a federal grant in 20-some years.
Oh my gosh! It's like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer in time for Christmas, but you're not invited to play any reindeer games.
Never, yeah. I'm not. It's cool. It's odd because so many grants of my peers, although they don't even really directly work on AIDS, are based on doing something relevant to help AIDS diagnosis and treatment and rejection and cancer. So they cannot afford to say, okay, Duesberg is doing what we are all supposed to do, ask basic questions, even if they generate unpopular answers. That is the last thing they can afford until they have 10-year or ideally retirement. Henry Bauer. Have you heard?
Yes, we've interviewed Henry Bauer over the years as well.
Yes, he's a good guy, but he's safely retired, so he's protected. And I should be retired too. I could if I were just a desktop scientist, but with a laboratory. If you retire and you have no lab and you cannot do anything anymore in the laboratory, you very fast lose that touch that you need.
Sure. Well, you could always join me on radio every day.
That would be fun. Yeah, this may be coming soon when they really close the lab. But this fact that they already tried, there was a misconduct investigation against me, which, like the Dr. Gallo, because I was going to global public health. That was the charge. Anonymous charges from outside. The president of the university ordered a misconduct investigation. Had to.
Yeah.
And I was exonerated. So it's difficult to throw me out now because I was exonerated.
Yes, beautiful. I love that. I love that. Now,
but it's not that they say, okay, now we'll restore your glory. We give you a grant and we give you a salary.
Right.
That they don't do either.
Here's not even a lollipop. Not that you'd want one, but folks, if you haven't been already to Peter's site, Duesberg.com, Duesberg.com, we have it linked up in the show notes, and there are many hours of archives from this date in history, as well as additional interviews with Professor Duesberg and some of the other folks that we've mentioned, some who we haven't, on this very subject, and we'll continue to talk about it until we don't have to anymore. And I'm so grateful for you, Peter. And where can people find this published article we've discussed about the predictions that didn't come to fruition about the decimation of the African population?
If it's not listed there, this one that I sent you, for example, is from the Italian Journal for Anatomy and Embryology. Is you can get it actually for free on Google.
On Google. Okay, we'll make sure that there's a link to it for everybody. Do you have a few more minutes, or do you have to run?
Yeah, no, have a few more minutes.
All right,
sure. Or you can get it from me. Just send an email to me. I would like to have the following reprints.
All right, stand by. We're going to wrap it up with Professor Duesberg. I can't get enough of him after this.
Or get it, ask Robert Scott Bell, and you send it to me. But they can send directly to me and say, I would like the following reprints.
In the health world, through the power of radio. It's the Robert Scott Bell Show.
Now, Professor Duesberg, I promise you it shall not be. I don't know how long it's been since I've had you on the show. That's why I'm not letting you go this quickly.
About 24 hours now.
Yes, too long. So
you had me on the show.
I will not let that much time. As long as you're amenable to joining me anytime. I love to, we've had great discussions even on things not necessarily AIDS related with our discussions of HPV and the scam of that. You've actually published a paper about that the human papillomavirus being claimed to be the cause of cervical cancer is not valid. It's not sound science. It's not been validated in the peer-reviewed literature yet. An entire industry, multi-billion-dollar vaccine industry spawned around this idea that now we can inject the human papillomavirus in various forms with other adjuvants, again, things that aggravate immunity and damage immunity, to prevent the manifestation of cervical cancer 10, 20, 30 years in the future, which we'll find out then that it was all a scam. But you know it now.
I would like to know, how did you know about it, the HPV story? That was not so long ago, and only after we talked frequently about AIDS. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how you found out about it.
Well, my radar is always on now. I mean, ever since we connected and before. Yeah, so we have a different way of looking at the claims. And my good friend, also another journalist, John Rappaport, and his extensive writings, we've done a lot together over the years to point out these absurdities. And we can now spot it like we're in the movie called The Matrix. We can see the writing flowing down the screen so obvious to us. He's
still in L.A., Rappaport.
No, he's in North Carolina now. He got out of California. I mean, I know you're tenured there, but I would say get out of California while you can. It's crazy town.
Really? So in North Carolina, yes? Yeah,
Asheville, a beautiful town. Asheville. It's kind of like, it's a little bit of California without all the crazy. It just kind of feels like the West Coast, but it's in the Appalachian Mountains on the East Coast.
You have his email in Asheville? Yeah.
I can absolutely connect you guys.
Do you remember David Ravnik? He was with me.
Of course, Rouse. I hear from him every once in a while, too. He was with Georgia Tech.
Yeah, he is in North Carolina now, but only for a limited time. But he tried to set up some company there, and that apparently didn't work out. So he probably would be more than happy to talk to John Rappaport.
Absolutely. Love to connect everybody. Like to get the gang back together, like the band. Get the band back together, like the Blues Brothers.
That would be, I mean, you should invite us to Washington for a conference on AIDS Day.
Yeah, well, I know. I meant to, I wanted to get out to see you guys when you were hosting those things before as well. Hopefully one day again we'll be able to all get together.
It costs a lot of money.
I know.
And the mainstream, they have all of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Tons of it,
Exactly. But I'll see, there might be some other events we can talk about getting you out to speak. And, I just love it when I get to introduce new folks to you, Peter Duesberg. You are a national treasure. And I know that self-effacing as you are, you might not like being called the rock star of retrovirology, but you're so much more than that to me. And I appreciate your integrity within the field of science, that you never thought that compromising for expedience or profit would be something that you could live with. And again, not everybody is like that or like you. And that's why, again, I so much greatly respect you for what you do and what you stand for.
Embarrass me.
Yes.
That's right. So, okay.
I try to make up for all the attacks, right? It's like a little bit I can do to go, you know what? Don't believe the haters. You are loved. You are appreciated.
Yeah, that's... okay, I was just thinking about one other friend. Dach, do you remember Dr. Dach? He is also somewhere close to Florida now.
Okay.
He was
I'd love to connect with any of our supporters. Again, over the years, I've gotten to talk to a lot of them. Christian Fiala, we've had...
Fiala. Yeah, he's very good. Yeah,
and...
He was on that paper with the HP vaccine.
That's right, which I've quoted numerous times in my lectures over the past year since it came out, Peter. So even when you're not on my show, you're with me as I'm out in the round working the circuit and teaching people.
Yeah, he is very good, and he's one of those who kept me going. He has some... Yeah.
Beautiful.
And Jeffrey Duff.
Yes, Jeffrey Duff. I remember now, yes.
He promised several times he would help, but haven't seen. Maybe you give him a little nudge.
I'll see what I can do. I will see what I can do. Hey, listen, promise me if anybody ever actually finds HIV...
He is in Florida.
He is.
He's in Willow Cove, Davie, Florida.
Oh, down in South Florida where we used to be. I wish I'd have known it when I was down there. Professor, what will you call me the moment you hear somebody has actually identified HIV and found it somewhere, anywhere?
Anytime, yes.
Okay. Hey, this has been a great episode of all episodes when we talk about this on World AIDS Fraud Day. Peter Duesberg, I can't say any more nice things about you. You'll blush and you'll fall off the phone or something. So thank you, my friend. Thank you so much for being back on with me. I appreciate you so very much. Bobby Russell's going to join us next on the radio. Stand by.
Here's Robert.
I've argued for many years now that if you want to get rid of AIDS, just stop HIV testing. That's it. It'd be over because the tests are a scam. Yet a military veteran, Bobby Russell, who we've interviewed before, reached out to me recently, and it's World AIDS Day. I thought we've got to talk about the human impact of the so-called HIV scam. How these tests ensnare you in a web of deceit and lies to put you on drugs that will ultimately kill you. Bobby Russell, U.S. veteran, was diagnosed in 2004, I shall say, and was put on HIV medication because they said he was positive, but apparently he wasn't. And the story's a sordid tale. He's been involved in lawsuits over that. He's now over the drugs, thankfully, organic gardening, cleaning up his life, and living healthily. It's an inspiring story ultimately, but he still needs some help. Bobby Russell, welcome back to the Robert Scott Bell Show.
Hey, Robert. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you got it. I mean, you are a living example of why they need to end these HIV tests altogether. Was it a nurse that initially wrote the letter P on you after a test? It was like the Western blot test, and they said, we don't know what it is yet. Here's a P that was supposed to mean pending, and another doctor took the P to mean positive.
That is actually correct. It was actually really a social worker for the Fayette County Health Department under the city of Lexington. Yes, that would be correct.
So you're again, a military veteran. you're out and suddenly they give you this test, and then you go to another clinic that somehow, I don't understand how they took this and said, oh, that must mean positive, as opposed to pending, which is problematic in terms of liability of a false diagnosis, although I argue that all HIV positives are false diagnoses, but we'll let that aside for a moment because this is about you and your story. They convinced you that you had so-called HIV, and then you started on these antiretroviral drugs. Yes,
that is correct. For 8 years and 11 months, really, to the date. October 15th, 2013 is the last day that I took my last pill, my last ARV.
Wow. And so you survived this 2004 to 2013. That's a testament to the health of your liver that you survived this. And now you're living a different life. You've realized nutrition matters, food matters, and you also recognize the falsity of the so-called diagnosis, the scarlet letter that they branded you with.
Absolutely. And, even with AZT, one of the most strongest drugs out there, and I was on that medicine for 5 years.
Wow.
2 additional years longer than what it was even recommended by the pharmaceutical industry, but I'm a survivor.
You are a tough, when you're in the military, I wouldn't want to mess with you based on what you've gone through even since then. So now you are, like I said, you're living differently. You understand more holistic concepts of supporting immunity and overall doing well, but you're still doing battle with what I perceive to be the bad guys, whether they meant to be bad guys or not. Wrong has been done here in terms of branding you this way and what has happened to your life since then. So you have filed suit a number of times, and right now the next move pending is to submit something to the Supreme Court because they say that, it took you too long to respond to the wrongdoing that was done to you?
You see, actually, Robert, the lower court's decision in the circuit court, they believe that I knew or should have known within 1 year, and that's what the statute of limitations says, from the time that the injury occurred, which that means that I should have known or I knew in 2005, and that is far from true. And the reason why is even in 2009, for example, when things got tough, I applied for military benefits. They asked for me to get my original diagnostic papers, and I requested for the original test results. Those results were withheld, and I was told that the medical file was missing, and I was finally able to retrieve those records in January of 2013.
So they said you had to find out within a year. They didn't even give you the records until 8 years later or 9 years later?
Correct. Yes, that is correct.
So, of course, the battle now is that they say, well, you can't sue. You've lost standing because you didn't sue within a year. And this becomes a big legal morass even beyond the HIV story, which is terrible as it was because, by all intents and purposes, you should be dead just of the drug poisoning, as we discussed with Professor Duesberg last segments. So you're alive and you're fighting mad, or how are you dealing emotionally with this?
It's been a really an amazing journey, but the thing is that I knew that when my case was filed in August of 2013, 8 months after I discovered that my test result was negative, I proceeded to, I was told that because of the accident and because of me choosing to only be in relationships with people that were positive, that I came in contact with someone that was positive, and that I was diagnosed now truly as having HIV. But without the medicine, that I would not survive 4 months. And the only way that I could get the medicine in Kentucky on the eastern side of Interstate 65 was to dismiss my case. And someone made a mistake in recognizing what abbreviations represent and mean. And I took a stand for what I believed in. And an injury occurred from an accident, and I want to make sure that this accident never occurs to someone else. So I want this accident to be recognized, and protocols and procedures to be established so that it can prevent this from occurring again to another family or to another individual.
Right, yeah. How many people have been misdiagnosed this way? Just the letter P, meaning pending versus positive. I mean, this is an error that could have killed you. I mean, you're fortunate to be alive. And I understand. I want to see this wrong righted if it's at all possible. I mean, you've served our country and the military, and those of you out there listening who are moved by this story and want to help, again, I don't know the outcome ultimately. We're dealing with the court system, and it's a mess. But if you feel like you're so moved to support Bobby Russell, we have a website linked up in the show notes at robertscottbell.com. We'll take you to bobbywrussell.com, and you can see the journey. You can read more than we could cover in a segment together, but you can also support. There's a PayPal link so that Bobby could get the final, hopefully, the submission done for the Supreme Court with an attorney that you have to work with here. Is there anything else my listeners should know to help you out here?
I just wish that I know that it's the end of the year, and if someone can find it in their heart to help me, I'm getting really close to the point of being able to raise enough money to retain counsel for me, to represent me and file my proceedings to the U.S. Supreme Court. I ran out of money in the Court of Appeals, and I represented myself to the Kentucky Supreme Court, and I did that here in Kentucky. But my motion was denied in September. And I understand, and they have notified me and told me that I have until December 19th to file my appeal. And I'm within just $2,000 or $3,000 from really having enough raised to do this. And it means a lot to so many people that really they don't understand. And I'm only asking for a discussion because this is an incident that could have been prevented. And I want to make sure that things like this cannot occur again. Whatever the necessary steps will be, I hope that it will be considered, established, and defined so that we don't have to deal with what I've lived in someone else's life, because it has been extremely difficult. But with my faith and with my beliefs in my willpower, my direction, I will move forward, and I find it a strong purpose in my heart. And I'd just like to note that in the last year, a few months, I have became the director for the Kentucky's chapter for the National Medical Malpractice Advocacy Association. And if someone feels like that they have been done wrong, I would encourage them to visit www.nmmaa.org, and feel welcome to go down to Kentucky and send me an email from there, and I will quickly respond to you, or I will send it over to the president of the organization for your questions to be addressed.
Well, Bobby, with your faith and your efforts, you can move medical mountains, and I think that some need to be moved at this point. And particularly, the things that have been done unto you, after leaving the armed forces, just horrific. Again, this could happen to anybody. Folks, we've been talking a lot about what I perceive to be the scam of HIV tests, which is bad enough. But if for those that don't even know that, they go in and they're given a false positive diagnosis, even though I argue all of them are false. But let's just say you believed in that paradigm. And now suddenly you're sent down a road of massive poisoning of your body to your death. And Bobby, thank God you are alive and you've come out of it, but yet there's some more that you want to do so that this doesn't happen to anybody else. So again, folks, if any of you are moved, it's not a lot that he has to get up to in order to put this next step together before January 17th or 19th, you said? I'm sorry, December or January?
December 19th.
So it's a few weeks away, folks. So if you feel at all moved, go to bobbywrussell.com, link up there, send a few dollars over to him in those efforts. I wholeheartedly support them. And if we can do more in the meantime, Bobby, I just appreciate you stepping up and standing up for doing what's right despite what you've been through.
I think it's the right thing to do for my country and for the citizens of this country, and for the name of health care and doctors and patients. I believe it's the right thing to do all the way around. So I find it passion in my heart to do what I'm doing.
Now, what would you tell somebody given this so-called HIV positive scarlet letter at this point, knowing what you've been through thus far? What is your message? Is it an empowering message? Is it a fearful message? Where would it fall on that scale?
I know that a lot of people might say it's important to know your status, but the most important thing is to educate yourself and know the test. We have 4 tests out there in the market. One is an oral quick test that you can buy in the supermarket. The next one is a ELISA test. Another one is a form of a PCR or a polymerase chain reactor test. Mm-hmm. And then we have the Western blot test. And we really need to become educated as to what those tests represent.
Yes.
What do they identify? And are they specific to a specific condition?
Virus. Yeah, exactly. And the House of Numbers is a great documentary that everybody should watch so that you don't fall for a test that has no standard. And a test that has no standard is not a test that is legitimate. Bobby Russell, appreciate you so very much for joining me today. Everybody get out there and support a military veteran on a cause that's a worthy cause. And I appreciate you so much. We'll follow up with you, okay?
And let me just ask, if anyone wants to share a message, just hashtag it Bobby W. Russell, and I will respond to all posts out there in Facebook world, okay?
Beautiful, thanks. Back to Wrap It Up with Super Don after this.
The Robert Scott Bell Show.